Hey, brilliant minds! Backed by popular demand, we are diving deeper into the world of pandas in Python. So today's mission, mastering filtering, sorting, grouping, and tackling missing data. This is video 12 out of 20 in our beginner series and introduction to AI. Ready to level up your data game? Let's roll. So pandas isn't just about holding data, it's about making it dance to your tune. Let's start with filtering, sorting, and grouping, the bread and butter of data manipulation. So first, I'm going to import our trusted packages of pandas and numpy. And then what we're going to do is we'll actually create an example data frame. So this should be able to have enough parameters to sort of teach you these concepts, at least for the first three. So we'll create 3 people with names. We'll name them Alice. We'll name them Bob, and we'll name them Charlie. Pretty basic. We'll give them ages as well. We'll make them 25, 30, and 35. And we'll put them in cities. What city do they live in? Let's say they live in New York. Let's bind that to a string. Bob is in LA, and Charlie is in SF. So first, let's just print this to make sure we're all happy with how this data structure looks like. And you can see we have essentially 3 rows and 3 columns. So that's great. So first, let's now review this concept of filtering. So with filtering, you can actually just filter out based off Boolean rules that you pass into the data frame. So I can access the data frame, and then I put in the rule here. So let's say I want to look for people who are young, and they define that as people who are under the age of 30. So then I do data frame, open bracket, and then data frame. This time, run the logic along just the age axis, and I'm looking for all people who are under 30. And then depending on how that looks, you will then print out the variable for young folks. And it makes sense, we only get Alice because she's the only one who is under 30. Now, let's study the concept of sorting. So it's sorted based off of age as well. So if I sort the values, and then you can actually define by, and in this case, we have our axes for age, and then you can print sorted data frame. If I print that, it will have the exact same order that we have here. Now, of course, that doesn't really show you anything because our original data set was already sorted. So why don't we switch Bob and Charlie? So I'll put Charlie here. I'll put Bob here. 35, 30. And Charlie was in SF and Bob was in LA. So let's re-replicate that. So now you have out of order, but then when I sort it, it's in the same order. And so that sort of shows you that you're able to actually restructure the whole data set over one singular axis. All right. Now, finally, let's look at this concept of grouping. Now, essentially, I can group people based off of their underlying city. So if I do grouped df, I can do this by group I. In this case, we'll sort them by their city. And in this case, you can do it by mean. And then you can print grouped df. And so this one is just a little bit weird because here we now have their cities, but then you pulled the mean value, which came from also their accompanying ages. And so this is a little bit strange, but in general, grouping is another way to basically pull out specific values. And in this case, we pulled out that value of city. All right, this was simple yet powerful. You've learned how to filter the young, you figured out how to sort by age, and you even grouped by city. So now let's address the elephant in the room, missing data. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, but fear not. With pandas, you can find those pieces or make new ones. So first, let me create a sort of emptied out data frame. And honestly, if you're working with dirty data in the wild, you're more likely to run into these types of situations. So we'll even create one that didn't have a user. And then let's create ages as well, similar to the last one, or the last example we had. But this time, let's only give Blake an age, whereas some of our other people, let's just fill it in with not a number. And again, this is something that you're likely to encounter in the wild when you're working with sort of unclean data sets, or you're working with survey data, or the company that you're working for just happened to gather data from users, but the users didn't fill everything out properly. And so now if I print this data frame, dfempty, you'll see that I have one value that's just empty with no name, and I have two not a number values. So now that that's the case, let's figure out how we can actually fill in the missing values with a replacement. So first, I'm going to show you how to fill it out with a replacement. And we'll do df_filled equals dfempty. And I can actually replace, and let's just say I have another data set that tells me that that empty string is actually a human being known as Margie. So now I can actually just print that new df_filled matrix, and you'll see, unlike the previous example, we now have a value that's been replaced in the second row for Margie. Great, so that's how replacement works. Now let's take a quick look at how we could run dropping rows but missing values. So sometimes you just don't want to deal with values that have not a number. So let's take the empty data frame, and I can just drop that. And basically, if I drop any of those rows that have the missing value, then all you'll get is the value for Blake, because the other two had not a number. So that's unfortunate, but that is one way to address not a number values in a data frame. Finally, the third thing that you can do is something more fancy known as imputation. So here, what I can do is actually print, what I can actually do is I can take my empty matrix, and we can take the age that's available, and what I can do is actually fill all those values of age, specifically fill those not a numbers, with our mean age. And so this is interesting, right? Because the way that you would calculate the mean age is to simply take that value that we calculated earlier using the mean calculation. So let's fill this out, and then I'll print it actually, so that way you have a visible indicator. And actually, one thing that I just realized, one key element that you want to throw in is actually you have to populate that mean age variable. So let's take dfempty. And even though we have one value, we'll have to still run the mean function on it. This will, of course, return 24 because there's only one number that I can use. But now, you'll see that my mean age was 24. And then you'll see that at least for the age matrix, I was able to substitute all three values with 24. And so finally, to wrap this up, if I basically print dfempty, now we now have filled all those values with 24. And there you have it. Whether or not it's filling gaps, dropping them, or smart imputation, Pandas has your back. And as you can see, part of the problem is not just learning the syntax, it's also having the wisdom and understanding of when to use certain methods as well as the context. This is video 12 out of 20 in our beginner series and an introduction to AI. By the end of this series, you'll be ready to learn more advanced concepts of AI and machine learning, which will allow you to elevate your career in tech and remain in demand on the job market.